like a fountain. You are streams in the wasteland. You're the well that won't run dry. Say, you're the well that won't run dry. I got joy, 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 'cause I got Jesus. I got joy down in my bones. I got peace like a river rushing through my soul. I got Jesus, so I got joy, 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 joy. I got joy, 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 joy. All right. I got joy, 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 joy. Your joy turns mourning to dancing, sorrow to gladness. So glad I have this joy. Brings beauty from ashes. I have found your joy. Turns mourning to dancing, sorrow to gladness. So glad I have this joy. Brings beauty from ashes. I have found your joy. Turns mourning to dancing, sorrow to gladness. So glad I have this joy. Brings beauty from ashes. I have found your joy. Turns mourning to dancing, sorrow to gladness. So glad I have this joy. Brings beauty from ashes. I have found that I got joy, 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 'cause I got Jesus. I got joy down in my bones. I got peace like a river rushing through my soul. I got Jesus, so I got joy, 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 joy. I got joy, 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 joy. I got joy, 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 joy. I got Jesus, so I got joy, 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 joy.
Warning, 1 minute warning. 1 minute warning. All right, friends. We're going to get started. We got some folks ready to lock the doors back there. So, in or out, folks. Don't tell the fire marshal. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. It is a beautiful day outside, and I know that you all, I just want you to know that Jesus sees your dedication to staying here, even though it is a beautiful day outside, and God will multiply your blessings as a result of it. That's as close as I get to a prosperity gospel. But welcome, folks. Thank you for sticking around, and we promise to keep this a tight 45 minutes, if not fewer, less time than that. Promise to get you out of here by 12:30, but definitely want to make sure that we have time to kind of take stock about where we are. And, you know, one of the things that we've been reflecting on as an elder board very recently was like all the new things that are emerging in our life together. So we had a little bit of conversation, and I'm sure that you have some things that you would add to about kind of what are some of the things that have come up in our life that we're noticing, kind of new growth, new sort of things that are emerging. So one is that our small groups or community groups are growing in numbers of people, and they're kind of at this really capacity space where, you know, I've visited the Inner Richmond CG, and Brett was like telling me how for the last 3 months he's been telling everyone basically to like start a new community group because they're just at capacity, and so new folks are coming in and wanting to get connected. I've been told we've had a pretty wide back door, and I think we're sort of having some folks kind of decide that they don't want to walk out that back door, so that's a real gift. In particular, our BIPOC and LGBTQI groups are growing really significantly, and so that I've met folks here and there who they go to the small group more than they come to church, which okay, that's like however they can get it, right? But so that's really a real gift. Our queering faith group that has been meeting about every other Tuesday. It's worth noting because it's a group that was intentionally designed kind of as a response to folks who don't necessarily identify as queer, but we're sort of like, I want to kind of get in on some of these conversations to sort of learn a little more and everything. So they, in response to that, our LGBTQI group leaders were like, well, let's have a small group that, or at least a format or forum where, where it is like inclusive, right? In the sense that, anyone who identifies in any way can come and be part of the conversation, and to sort of make some of the boundaries between each other a little more porous, so to speak, in ways that are helpful and healthy. And so that I taught the last one, and I'm teaching the next one this week. Co-taught it, and the energy in that space was just like so alive. And there were people who that was their first touch point for City Church. I met a couple of folks who were like, I heard about this group, and I'm coming here for the first time. And so really good kind of things happening of growth there. Our participation up front in worship has increased. If you haven't noticed, we've got different faces and different songs as a result of that. And that, all the throwbacks that keep coming up, I was like, third day, okay, this is like 1999. But really wonderful kind of diversity kind of coming up in that. Our community meals are even more well attended than they have been in the past, and they're like really, y'all are showing up with good food, and so folks are sticking around and getting to know each other. We had a newspaper article. I'm not sure if you guys saw that, but we made the front page of the Chronicle the day after Easter, and it was just we've had some folks who have found out about us through that and have come to sort of check us out and are feeling like maybe they found a home among us. And then finally, the last thing I'll say that I've heard is that, I'm hearing a lot of people who are newer coming in, getting involved and saying, hey, how can I also host? And wanting to sort of not just receive, but also jump in and participate and take on that, a practice and culture of hospitality in the life of our community together. And so really good generative stuff that's happening. And I hope that I trust that you all are kind of seeing that happen as well, or maybe even feeling that. And I would love if there are particular stories or things that you've seen in the life of the church of kind of new growth or new ways that you're seeing God show up. Please let me know. I mean, it's a real encouragement for our staff and for our elders as well. And a good way to encourage each other in the midst of all the different kinds of transitions that we have happening. And so even as we sort of move into our finance conversation, I wanted to sort of seed your kind of framing and lens with this realization that, we're kind of in this like, awkward sort of adolescent time in a way, right? Where it's sort of like, things are growing, and it's also feels really different. And these are signs of emergent futures, right, that are coming among us. And so with that, I'm going to shift over or step over so that Alex can come up and share a little bit about specifically. Alex is our treasurer, so folks, in case people don't know, can share a little bit about our finances.
Hi, everybody. Alex Lim here. Yes, so I'm part of the finance team. It's also Rhonda Wilson, Don Wong, they're both out of the country, unfortunately, and then Elizabeth Marshman, who will be sharing some words. Oh, yeah, also. Oh, Rhonda's here. You're back. Sorry. Awesome. Another person you should definitely go and ask questions about the finance. So I'm gonna, kind of give you a very, very high level and a little bit of what kind of the elders, the staff were looking at as we were making some decisions about some of the things you'll hear about on the kind of budgeting and kind of the broader financial health side. So there's a lot of details here that the elders, the finance team have gone through. So if and we're happy to share any and all of that for you. But I understand that not everyone wants to hear everything, so we'll kind of keep it at a high level, and then I'll be around. Others will be around to answer any specific questions you have, and we're happy to kind of get as detailed as you want. So the first slide here. So on the very left-hand side is what we started the year out kind of budgeting. You guys have seen this version or those numbers before in other meetings, but basically, we thought we'd get about 2.3 million in total income. That includes, tithes. That includes other gifts. That includes interest we get from our cash. That includes counseling center revenues, things like that. So that's like all income, and then we were budgeting to that number, so 2.3 million of expenses. In the middle of the year, we kind of did a check-in, we're checking all the time, but kind of in the middle of the year, we really saw something that was concerning, that income projected was in the kind of 1.7 to 1.9 million range, and the expenses, if we were to kind of go continue on the path of the budget, we'd be short, kind of plus or minus $500,000 for the year, which was, I think, more than we were willing to kind of, was more than kind of what we thought we wanted to do for the budget year. And so we started implementing some changes, looking at the budget, as well as kind of really shoring up, talking to folks that were thinking of giving or folks that had given in the past, trying to making sure that we were understanding kind of what the income number really looked like. And so, so as of this moment, we're thinking that we'll get somewhere in the range of 1.8 to 1.9 million in total income for the year that ends in August 31st. And that those expenses, really, Elizabeth will talk more about, but just really kind of getting the staff to really, working with the elders to try to tighten up the budget as best we can, and kind of, you'll hear about some of the things that they're going on to reduce the expense number to about 2.1. So now our projected loss is about $200,000 to $300,000 for the year, which I think is pretty good, given that we really put the budget together to begin with not a lot of fat in it. So, it's really hard to squeeze out the kind of savings we have, but the staff and the elders have been really good about being creative and trying to find ways to do that. So, I feel like this is incredible that we're gonna, bring in this much amount of income, as well as be able to kind of get pretty close on the budget side. And so if you look at the next slide, you'll see the fund reserves over time. Not the direction you want to go necessarily, but we're projecting about $900K to $1 million in the bank account by the end of August 31st, which, you put that in context, I think our goal, as a leadership team is to, not to save money, right? It's to spend it, it's to steward it, is to make sure we're doing really good ministry with it. So, we're not trying to save as much money as we can. That's not the point. The point is to use it well and have reserves so that we feel like we can do it without being worried about, running out of money, right? So, $1 million kind of reserve, that the context there is, we want to have a 6-month type of reserve in the bank account. So if your budget is $2 million, let's say, $1 million kind of reserve is reasonable, and it's something that we're hoping for. So, that's the context I'll give you. Happy to give you a lot more detail behind that. And Elizabeth's going to share a little bit about some of the budget cuts and the things that we're tinkering with. One of the things that we've been working on that I think Emily shared is our lease for this building. So, we're set for the lease to kick up to $14,000 a month from $10,000 a month for kind of in June. And so we've been negotiating with the Veterans Center, and we've come to terms. And so we're going to be going up to 11,000 from 10,000, not 14, so 11,000. And then we've extended that lease for 3 years. So feel like it gives us stability. It's obviously more than we're paying now, but it's not as much as we would have been paying. And it gives us 3 years to consider kind of our budget and the space and what we're going to do going forward. So feel like that was a good outcome, and I think it was approved by the elders and the finance team. So. Well, San Francisco crowd, rent increases, keep it low, yeah. So anyway, happy to share more details about that, and hand over to Elizabeth.
I didn't know everyone loved the disco ball this much. We get to stay another 3 years here. All right, I'm Elizabeth. I'm an elder, also a member of the finance team. Going to talk through a little bit more in specifics about some of the adjustments we're making to our budget for the rest of the fiscal year, so the next 5 months, and talk a little bit about the process we went through. I think it's worth mentioning that when we got to sort of this halfway mark in the fiscal year and decided it was time to make some changes, our staff actually had really been conservative with their budgets. They'd only spent about 90% of what we'd given them for the first 6 months. So again, our staff are really good stewards with the money that we give them. So we started in a decent place. And then at that point, you may remember at the beginning of the fiscal year, we shared our narrative budgets. So sort of each section of the budget, things like worship arts, operations, youth, and the staff shared their vision of what they're intending to do and sort of the overall number that's in that budget for each section. So what we did is we paired up elders with each staff member that oversee each of those sections. We sat down with them. We revisited kind of the vision of that section, and then brainstormed together some ways in which we could reduce spending while still sort of carrying out and embodying the vision of that ministry. So in doing so, we were able to identify about 35K in additional cuts that we could make between now and the end of our fiscal year, which is at the end of August. I think we have a slide that goes over sort of some specifics. So Alex already spoke about our lease and negotiating a lease extension at a lower price than what we originally asked for by the Russian Center. With regards to parking, this is something that's still sort of in flux. We're still trying to understand what we're going to do here exactly, but we do pay, I think, about $25 per car every Sunday for folks who park in the garage. And we do really want to continue to have a space that's accessible for everybody to be able to park here if they need it. But just as a heads up, we may be renegotiating how we provide parking, either asking for contributions or just being able to renegotiate parking in a way that's proportionate to our budget. So stay tuned there. On worship arts, you may have seen up front, we actually have a lot more congregants who are involved in our Sunday mornings music. So we actually, we're reducing the number of paid musicians we have every Sunday. We also have reduced the number of paid setup crew and sound techs every Sunday. Later in the meeting, this is actually a great place for you to get involved if you want to be involved on a Sunday morning. But that's a place that we did reduce our spend. On discipleship, so this is things like our classes that we offer, some of our groups, some of our speakers. We're shifting towards sort of more potluck style and fewer catered events. So we still have this value that we want to get to know one another over communal meals, really have time that isn't just listening, but really is sharing meals together and talking. But we're kind of trying to shift the way that we do that in a way that is more sort of a communal contribution. Again, trying to be sort of proportionate to our budget. Under church management, we reduced our spend around elder retreats, staff retreats, and we're also going to be having fewer guest preachers and guest speakers for the rest of the year. And we are going to be putting a pause on hiring full-time roles. So this includes, for example, I think we've talked about before, hiring an associate pastor of congregational care. We've decided to pause that until the next fiscal year when we have an opportunity to reevaluate our budget. So all of these conversations between elders and staff came out with those decisions, and also really kind of laid the foundation and the groundwork to guide our budgeting decisions for the next fiscal year, which will start in September. So some brief takeaways on some of those specifics. I think all in all, the Elder Board is really trying to support our staff and really work with our staff who feel called to their ministry here, making sure that they have what they need. Our staff cares about this congregation so much, and just really cares about their ministry here that they feel called to. And so the goal of this is not to kind of subdue them or cut their ability to do what they want to do, but really support them and make sure they have what they need while just being creative about how we go about sort of capturing that vision. And as a congregation, the folks up here, we're elders, we're finance team members, we're also congregants, right? So this is also an opportunity sort of for me as a congregant also to look at these numbers and to just see that these numbers tell a story that is worth noting. As Emily said, we're a congregation in transition, we're in change, and a lot of that change is actually is generative, is growth, and is transitional. And also these numbers sort of have an invitation, I think, inherently embedded in them. And I think what that invitation is that each of us here has agency in influencing both, graphs and numbers, but then also kind of what this community looks like and feels like to each one of us. And so if you are someone here who feels like you've benefited from the ministries of this church, whether that's your kids' spiritual growth, kind of participating in the space that is cultivated here on Sunday mornings, the music, the sermons, the classes. Just as we've taken time to re-examine our budget, I would just invite you to take time to re-examine yours and see if there's room in there to financially participate, to give to these ministries. For me, the way that I think about that is, for me, it's a spiritual practice, a way of kind of letting go. It's a practice of gratitude, of saying thank you to this community. It's also a way for me to sort of like vote for the kind of world I want with my money. And it's also for me a way to say, like, I commit to this community. I commit to being a part of this community and saying I want to be a part of this. So, just ask that you would consider kind of how you might either give for the first time or adjust and re-up your giving even before the fiscal year is out. And I think it's also important to note that God's economy is not just a financial one. There are many ways to participate in this community that isn't just giving, and we are going to spend some time in the rest of the meeting talking about that. So if you feel like you want to get involved more, we would welcome that. It's not just a practical way to sort of alleviate some of these cuts, but then also kind of a way to build community, to create a space for yourself to belong here, also to create space for others to belong here through volunteering in one of many ways that Sarah's going to talk about later. But before we shift to that, do we want to take questions on the finance? Yeah, so if anyone has any sort of financial specific questions on anything that Alex shared or I shared, we definitely welcome those questions. I think there's a mic that Jason set up if you want to ask any questions. So any questions? Yeah, go ahead. Alex, you want to come up here to answer with us?
Just two observations and one question. First, just a big thank you to the elders for the thoughtfulness that you brought to this process, and to the staff, because I know that these changes are going to have an impact on you and the workload that you have, so I want to acknowledge that. I'm personally more than willing to pay for parking. I can't speak for anyone else, especially since I bike half the time, so full disclosure. Those are my observations. My question is just the changes that you enumerated, Elizabeth. Are those where the full $200,000 is came out of the budget?
Part of that.
I was just confused because you mentioned something about 35,000 somewhere. Yeah.
So there was about 35K in the cuts that I enumerated there.
Yep.
Also, as I mentioned, I think briefly in the very beginning, our staff had only spent about 90% of the budget they were originally allocated for the first 6 months. So we actually started off the year with not spending as much as we had anticipated those first 6 months.
Got it.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the last piece was that associate pastor for congregational care. We had budgeted for that salary, and we have not hired that, nor do we plan to hire that. Is that?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that gives me where we got the full 200.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, come on up.
Great job on the keeping the Russian center. I think that was huge. So thank you very much. What happens in 3 years? Is there a commitment you guys have made in terms of the price and the tenure?
We have not. I think the Russian Center did not want to commit longer than that. I'm not sure we weren't actually offering because I think that the price would go up if we did. So that was kind of the medium of like doing something short where it was kind of the rent was high, doing something longer where they didn't want to commit to giving us what they considered a lower rate for that long. So it was that was the kind of compromise.
Did they have another tenant in place? I mean, 40% hike seems ridiculous, and then to negotiate.
Yeah.
that.
So the 14K comes from a pre-COVID number that they were ramping us up to, and so we had to kind of So after COVID happened, or during COVID, we went to a very, very low rent just because we weren't using the space, and so they were trying to now kind of ramp us back to that level, and we had to just be honest with them and say that was not a level that we could support, and so that's kind of where it went. They've been really good about working with us, so it's been great they want us here. I think they're making improvements to the space. We can judge what those improvements are. No, they are. But they've been making improvements. They've been spending money on the property, so they want to feel like, as landlords, as you can imagine, to get value for it. And they definitely, I don't think they've tested the market. I mean, we're here, so they can't really do that. So, yeah, we did share some comps with them based on the work Emily and the elders staff have done around other properties that we've looked at. And so, 10K-ish is not off market. I don't know if they get it for this space, but it's a little bit of we don't want that. We don't want to risk that either. So.
Well, great job. Thank you, guys.
By the way, on the parking, just in case you're wondering, it's an awkward situation because we have kind of an upfront cost that we have to pay. So if you're like, okay, I'm not going to park there anymore, I'm going to park somewhere else, actually the cost per car goes up if you don't park there. So it's a weird situation because we have an upfront payment we have to make every week regardless of how many cars show up. So it's with the average number of cars, it's about $20, $25, which it's also not that off market because, parking here for 2 hours, all these medical buildings, it's kind of in that range of $10 an hour, $7.50 an hour, something like that. So, yeah, it's such a challenging place because they don't open unless we're paying them to open because they don't open on the weekends. So on Sundays. The upfront cost? $3,500
a month.
Yeah, it's a little bit less than that. Yeah, I think it's about it's $700-800 probably a week. Yeah, something like that. So $550 up front. Yeah, $550 up front per week, and then every car it's $5 more. So something like that. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Julie. 2 questions. One is just for context about church budgets in general. How does our budget compare to other churches our size? And then you probably have talked about that before, but same with reserves, what you're hoping to have based on what you know about church budgets. And then the second is do you all have any ideas besides like communicating out the need to the church for giving, which is important? Do you have any ideas of like how you might build up the budget again to what you need? Like any specific activities or tactics that you're thinking of?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I, in the process of trying to figure out our budget, kind of how to approach our budgeting, I talked with a few churches around. I talked with folks at Calvary Presbyterian Church, which is also here in San Francisco, First Pres Berkeley, and Sunnyvale Presbyterian Church. I just had colleagues at all of those, and I was like, give me the scoop, right? So by and large, our budget is very similar in terms of when you kind of break down like staff members and congregation numbers. A distinction is that those congregations have a lot more historical money in them, right? So I was kind of surprised. One of the churches, I won't say which one, has a lot of property, but actually their kind of savings is $500K. And I was like, well, what would you do if you ran into situation? Then they had to like cut half their staff. They were like, we'll sell our property. So, they all kind of have, and then another church has a foundation that they regularly, their budget is a little bit more over than ours in terms of the gap between what's coming in and what they're spending, but they can just draw from the interest of this foundation, right? And then another church has also a lot of property, and they rent it out to a music school with like 600 students, right? So they have other forms of income, like to a little bit what Julia was getting at, that they can sort of fall back on, that we just, we have a healthy reserve, and that's what we have, right? So I think that's where we are in comparison. On one hand, it felt a lot like, wow, we're all kind of in a similar range, but our circumstances, right, are different. That's one piece. And then into the piece about sort of what can we do? I mean, I think the biggest thing, and I know this is like a little bit skittish for a lot of particularly folks who might come from certain backgrounds of the church, but is outreach. I mean, let people know that we exist. There are people who are looking for a community like ours, and this is not, turn or burn kind of like evangelism, right? This is, hey, did you know that we're here? Come and be part of this good thing that God is up to. And that is a thing that constantly needs to happen in any urban context, because just the turnover is always so great in cities. And so when we go to the Pride Parade, we're not just out there saying like, yay, we love gay people, which is totally true. We're also passing out invitations. Come check out our church, right? Come visit us. Come see what we're up to. And so, it's not for everyone, but it is for someone who's looking for us. And so however we can do, we've tried a few different evangelism things. Last year we had a table out at Beta Breakers and just had like conversations with, all the zany people coming by. And, just being out about our community is a way to do that increased kind of ultimately, not just increasing funding, but increasing the good stuff that's happening among us as a church.
I'll just add, just kind of, I think, very my own personal opinion is that, the generosity in this church is incredible. Like, so many of you are giving so much of your resources here, both financially and otherwise. So for me, I want us to be able to do good ministry with the money we're able to bring in from all your generosity. And I don't feel like there's a deficiency or not or whatever. I think we just got to get the numbers to work every year. And that's being conservative on the budgeting side, and hoping to continue to push and as Emily's saying, get more people here and increase the budget. But like whatever we raise, I think is more than, well, not more than enough, is enough to do really good ministry. And we've proven that over year after year. I mean, so I have like, the track record of our staff and our church to back me on this, that we can do really good ministry with the money that comes in. And the more money comes in, the more we can do, which I think you've all seen, many of you who've been here for a while, like we can do some really amazing things when we have some excess capacity to launch new ministries, to do stuff like City Hope and Faith and Justice, stuff like that. So I just feel like, don't walk out of here being like, oh, like we've really like missed, on like, bringing it, from raising money, from reaching our goals. It's like we've hit our goal just by the amount of generosity you guys have, have brought to the table already. It's just a matter of like us being transparent with you about how we're spending that money and kind of where our goals are and how we're going to adjust them going forward. But yeah, I don't know. Is that fair? Like, I don't want to like dissuade you from giving more. But I also don't want you to feel like there's like no deficiency in what's going on. It's definitely just a way to make sure we're doing all that we can with the money that we have. Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions?
Again, I'm going to echo what has already been said about thank you for all your good hard work. Thank you for being good stewards, not overspending, not putting us in a deficit of any kind. I'm also a person of details, so I always used to wonder how much the parking and the donuts each week were. And then also, there used to be a large number of guest speakers, which I used to question. So is there an average cost related to individual guest speakers? Of course, it depends on where they live and airfare and all that. Thank you.
Yeah, it does depend very much on like if we're paying for them to fly out and stay over. I think honorariums go from like 500 and up. Is that fair? Fair? Yeah, unless like you're a friend of Emily, then you get shafted. You get but yeah, so I think that's and then I can get you cost of donuts and stuff. It's obviously it's not super meaningful. I mean, the donuts are good, but they're not that good. So I don't think it's like that meaningful.
Their value is higher than just their pure dollar spent.
100%. I wholly agree. I was the one asking for donuts. You can ask Steven. I was asking for donuts way early on in COVID. But yeah, so I think I can give you more details. But yeah, that's kind of the ballpark.
All right, I think we're going to transition to the next section.
Yeah, so we've heard a little bit more, and there was just previously Alex was kind of getting at this. Like, this is just a shift, right, in how we live out our life together. And yes, the dollars and cents are important. They make a difference, but it's also one part of what God's economy looks like. And so there's sort of a tension between wanting to make sure that we are fiscally responsible and economically viable and all of those things, but also to what end, right? Is that piece that we're always holding ourselves accountable to. And so this is a culture shift to some extent, and a distinct expectation shift, maybe even about what people can expect at a evening class, or in terms of parking or other aspects of our life together. But it's also an opportunity for us to really lean into what it means to be community and show up for each other. And so even though, some of it to some extent is being driven, or these conversations are bubbling to the top because of our financial realities, they are actually questions that we should be engaging in anyway, about what does it mean to put in as a community, to build community, and to cultivate a deeper sense of belonging alongside one another. Serving together helps you get to know each other better, right? And getting to volunteer in different areas helps you meet people that you might not necessarily have built relationships with. So I think it's important to kind of remember that there's the pragmatic side, but there's also the sort of like relational, spiritual church side of what's happening here, and to understand that God will not ask anything of us that God doesn't give us the means to be able to do. So I want to invite you to kind of lean into this, sort of hold the two tensions of like, there is a real need, and there is something kind of different that God isn't, is sort of calling us toward as we live out our life together. And so I'm going to invite Sarah up a little bit to share about what that might look like. and how you can maybe participate in that.
All right. Hi, everybody. It is good to see you all. Yeah, I want to echo just briefly what Emily was saying as I've been in these conversations, at elder meetings, around my dinner table, in one-on-ones with staff members. I think a thing that has been coming up for me has been that the financial reality is at once something we would love to shift and change, and partly because we want to have capacity to do the amazing things that Alex was talking about. And it also is an opportunity that is helping us sort of realize more faithfully some ways to live into our call as being a church. One of the things you sort of may or may not know is that when you have money to throw at something, you often throw money at something, right? And so this actually is an opportunity for us to sort of dig into some of those other equally valuable resources that God has given us as a church in one another. As I was thinking about this, I was actually thinking about Paul's letter to the Corinthians. In 1 Corinthians 12, he's talking to a group of people who, if you've read his letter, they really valued some leaders and some community members more than others because those people were like the spiritual pros. They were the people with like the spiritual gifts, and so they were the people who were kind of elevated and visible in the community. And Paul really sort of is pushing back on them. I mean, he is firing all kinds of guns in that letter. And but in particular, in 1 Corinthians 12, he has this metaphor that he finally settles on where he talks about the church being a body. And we're so used to hearing that, I think we just don't really think about it. But if you really think about sort of that organic metaphor, and he really gets granular in it, right? He's like, an eye isn't an ear, and if the whole body was an ear, like where would the sight be? If the whole body was an eye, where would the hearing be? You can't have a body without hands and feet, and like you need sort of all of these pieces to actually be what you're supposed to be. And I think that's really true of us as well. Unlike other organizations that we're all a part of and that society offers, where we self-select based on our interest, our ability, what we look like, how much money we have, who our families are, the church is a place that is not put together by us, but by God. And it's put together for God's purposes. We just get to welcome and accept one another and then actively look together for the ways that each of us has been given. Paul uses the phrase, he says, each of us have been given a manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. And there is not one person in this room, watching online, who is a part of our community who isn't here because, or who, let me say, sorry, I'm going to go double negatives there. Every single person who is in this room, who is watching, is a part of our community, is here because God has put you here and because God has deemed that we need you and that we need one another. And so actually all of these unhappy or difficult fiscal conversations have brought that to the surface for me and have led me to feel like this is something we need to lean into together. We have an opportunity to pray and reflect together on what all of us have to offer to help this body actually function the way it's supposed to function. So we're not just like one big, ear falling over on itself, or like something that's out of balance or unwieldy, but a functioning, healthy body of Christ. So for some of us, that is gonna mean asking how we can be more present, honestly, and how we can show up in new ways that bring our unique gifts and our offerings to bear. Some of us are already doing that. So I'm not here to pile on and be like, you're not doing enough, do more, do more, do more, right? That's not the ask. For some of it might be looking up from what we're doing and looking around and saying, hey, who haven't I asked to show up and get involved or come do something alongside of me? How am I trying to do all of this myself? And who else is out there that I might want to connect with and invite in? So I guess I just invite all of us to think about where we fall there, about how we can show up sort of more faithfully together. I'll be brief because it is a beautiful afternoon out, but I do want to name there are some concrete opportunities for engagement that are available to all of us right now, and I just want to mention them briefly. On the leadership side of our church, so we have a fabulous pastoral staff. We have a fabulous staff that is doing good work. We also have lay leaders who help run the church. So we have the elder board, and it is actually nomination season coming up for the elder board. So elders are at our church are nominated by members of the congregation, and then we hold a vote, and then they're installed. It's a 3-year term, and basically think of the elder board as kind of the like advisory decision-making governing body of the church, like the board of directors or something. I don't know if that's the right metaphor, but with spiritual responsibilities. Yes, we're also the folks who do the interview memberships and baptism memberships, and we pray for you, actually, when we gather together as a board. So there's all of these pieces are there. So if you know someone who you think would make a good elder, please nominate them. I don't know when we're actually opening up nominations. Oh, there you go, right there. It's open today. So if you are a member of City Church, you can nominate another member of City Church to be an elder. Also, if it's something that you are sort of feeling like a niggling, like I actually might want to serve there, come talk to one of us, one of the elder board. This morning, let's see, Ryan, Elizabeth, I'm here, Thomas, Rhonda, am I missing anybody? Bethany, Thomas, yes, are we all here? We're all here. This is great. Okay, so you can come talk to any of us about it as well. In addition, we have our finance team led by our long-suffering, can we just please all clap for Alex? I do not know what we would do without this guy. If you yourself have gifts and ideas around fundraising, some of the questions that Julie was asking earlier, like what's our plan? If this is something that you have experience in or gifts with, or experience in financial oversight, and maybe you want to help support the financial team, please talk to Alex or Elizabeth or Rhonda. They would love to hear from you. And we also have, I don't know if you noticed, we have a personnel team. They are an advisory body, so not like a decision, not a hiring, firing, but there's an advisory body that supports Emily as the head of staff, just as she leads our staff. They're kind of a sounding board and a helper. So if you're somebody with gifts around organizational management, developing processes to help our staff thrive, if you work in people success, that could be a good fit for you. So come talk to one of us or talk to Emily if that's something you're interested in. And then also just our life together on Sunday mornings. We always need more people in children's ministry. We have an absolutely phenomenal children's ministry there is not much like it out there. And if you would love to be a part of just telling stories, building relationships, just spending time with some of the youngest members of our church, we need you. We always have needs around greeting and hospitality. Kim leads our greeting ministry. Thank you so much, Kim. It's very important. So always looking for more greeters. Just say welcome, good morning. And then we're also, if this is something that if you have a gift for making space and welcoming people in, we're looking for leadership in kind of expanding our existing hospitality systems, imagining and just building new ways to sort of create space and create welcome that go beyond, obviously greeting and just welcoming people into the space, but then ongoing, what does hospitality and welcoming people into our life together in deeper ways look like? So we would love to talk to you if you've got ideas around that. And then if you're like, yeah, I don't want to do anything official, actually, no thank you. It is as easy as contributing to our life together is as easy as just doing some on-the-ground, old-school community building. I don't know how many of you guys know Henry Rourke. He's in my community group. He, just on his own, most Sundays, texts all the people from our CG and then folks from the LGBTQ CG and is like, hey, we're having brunch at this place, go here. Super low-key, right? Nobody's paying him. He's not on staff. No one's making him do this. He just does it. It's awesome. Things like this are not hard to do. Organizing post-worship hangouts. If just getting a one-on-one with somebody. You meet somebody, how many times do we meet somebody on a Sunday morning and we're like, hey, so good to see you, I'm this, oh, we work in the common space, we should get together sometime. Do you get together? I don't. I'll be honest, right? Like, we could do a better job of that, like that kind of like follow through. So those are the, sorry to go back to the body metaphor, but like those are the little tiny stabilizer muscles or the sinews that kind of strengthen some of these bigger muscles of life together. And last but not least, we always have opportunities to serve together. If you want to get involved serving at City Hope, I mean, you can just go on their website and sign up, or you can connect with Micah Eichmeyer. He coordinates that, and if you want to see about like trying to do it in a more organized with other people way, Christy has resurrected the Beatles Choir, which has been around for as long as I've been at City Church, which is a long time. 14 years, yes. So like, let's keep that going because it's awesome. So if you like to sing, you don't have to be good. You just have to be able to sing a Beatles song. You can do that. So there are so many, there's so many more opportunities besides those. Those are some concrete needs that we need. So think about them, pray about them. We would love to see what it looks like for all of us to come together well to live our life together. Whether we have loads of money rolling in or not, that doesn't matter in terms of how we show up for one another. That's something that's in all of our control. So I'm going to hand it back to Emily.
I want to share just my gratitude for our elders and the ways that they have really faithfully committed themselves to just really the complicated conversations that all of this has required. Their spiritual tenacity and their faithfulness and their love for this community is not, just can't be overstated. So thank you for that. And the thing that I just want to remind you all of is like, God is doing a lot of really good things in our midst. I mean, we have new folks coming in and finding their home here. We have people getting baptized certainly today, but several times already this year, joining, wanting to learn more about us. I get visitors pretty regularly who say, we've been watching what you're doing, and not me specifically, but what City Church is doing, and we're learning from you. And so, what's happening here is not just for us, but it's happening in other spaces as well. And being, if not an inspiration, then I think just a model for like what church could look like in this kind of post-COVID reality, which everyone is sort of is trying to find their way into. And so I invite you as kind of your next most faithful steps, certainly to think about ways of leadership or getting involved, but also to pray for our church, to think about how you're being invited to contribute right now, and to invite people in. And so whatever that looks like for you, and we are still trying to figure out sort of what are all of our on-ramping processes for all of these things. So apologies for the parts that feel vague, and but there are concrete ways that you can get involved right now. But we're turning the ship, not just in some of the obvious ways, but in the like internal ways of how are we in relationship with ourselves, right? And how can we cultivate something that feels rich and good and deep for this new season in our life together. With that, let's close in a word of prayer. God, we thank you for the gift of this community, the ways that what it means to follow you is really just a long obedience in the same direction, where we can from time to time look back and just see how much farther we've moved in our own journeys, and also collectively what we have made our way through. I pray for this community and for the future that you have for us. God, we know that new signs of life are not an indication of the end, but an indication of something yet to come. And so help us, even as we try to be good stewards of the gifts that you've given and live into a different reality, help us to keep our eyes fixed on where it is that you are inviting us to go. Help us to not live in a space of anxiousness, but move toward a place of possibility, to have the courage to risk boldly for your purposes and your work in our community. Help us to have a generosity of spirit with one another. Help us to encourage each other, and help us to move move together, not only for ourselves and for the success or life of this community, but for this city, for our neighbors, for all of those who look at us either as a body or in our own individual lives, that they might catch a glimpse of what it means to live fully alive because of who we are and who you are calling us to be. So we give this future to you, knowing that it's yours anyway, knowing that it can only come about by the things that you can do within and through us, and how much we're willing to give ourselves over to that. Let us be transformed in this process, that we might come alive in new ways because of your good love and the faithfulness that we seek to pursue for your purposes in San Francisco and beyond. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen. Thanks, everyone. If you have questions, you want to stick around, feel free to, but otherwise, thank you for your time.